Now, I'm not going to try to hide the fact that I am an MMO junkie. The concept of a game that never really ends is one that really appeals to me. I like the idea of a forever game, even if I do end up bouncing between them constantly. And when I think of MMOs, especially MMORPGs, I think of World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Elder Scrolls Online, hell, even Destiny 2. But Guild Wars? Guild Wars 2 is just one that never really appeared on my radar, which after playing the game for so long makes no sense to me, seeing that it is one of the big five, and it's the only one that I've yet to see an advertisement for. But nonetheless, I did find it, and I did play it. And before I continue, I want to make something very clear. Guild Wars 2 is not a dead game. Despite having no advertisements or no one in the mainstream talking about it, it is very much alive and kicking and worth giving a shot for yourself. Now, starting up, like every MMO, you get to make your own character, and character customization is serviceable. I liked it. You can choose from a variety of races: human, big human, plant-based non-GMO human, this thing, and obligatory furry bait. It worked, but who can blame me? Who doesn't want to play as a cat with bad back posture? But seriously though, all of you could really benefit greatly from a chiropractor. There are also 8 classes that you get to choose from, with one more, the Revenant, being available once you own any of the 3 major expansions. But every class in and itself is highly customizable in what weapons you'd like to use, which also have a different set of moves based on what class you are. The sword on a warrior will have a different moveset than the sword on a ranger or something. And this game has weapon swapping mid-combat, so don't stress too much about choosing the right class right now, because you have a bit of wiggle room. My only suggestion would be not to play as the Elementalist. Not because it's a bad class, only because it is a little bit complicated pretty early on. But if you can manage your skills well, then I think you'll have a good time even with that class. Now, the combat itself is quite nice too. It's a mix between tab target and active combat. I've always enjoyed the tab target formula, but I have to say I most certainly prefer this hybrid, which I partly attribute to the class's designs themselves. If you don't like one weapon, then just try a different one, and swapping between them constantly mid-combat is honestly a lot of fun. There's also no holy trinity here, something that I was initially quite skeptical of at first. I usually play a tank, but I think it works here. Plus, it's not like the roles are completely absent either. If you want a tank, then you can do that. You just need to build your character around that. Same for healing, but you're not stuck with that role. If you want to heal, but inevitably realize that being a healer isn't fun, then just swap out your healing gear. The combat as a whole just gives a lot of freedom on how you want to play. I personally have been having fun as an untamed ranger with a focus on condition damage, using dual axes to put down bleed stacks and to sustained DPS, and a sword to give me more movement options, all while commanding a pet to do more. It's definitely one of the more button mashy ways to play, but I still think it's fun. Now, when it comes to an MMO, I believe that there are 3 core parts: the grind, the endgame, and the community that surrounds it. And while yes, good combat and a good story can make a good game, it won't always make a good MMO. So first, the grind. Guild Wars 2 has horizontal progression, so it's a little hard to quantify the grind when most of it is completely optional. The max level is 80, and getting to that point is honestly a really fast process. It only took me around 25 hours to max out my first character, and much less for any after that. The game is really toon-friendly, as it's not hard or tedious to make and level multiple characters. Plus, you'll get these little items that boost you up a level just by playing. However, I will say I don't recommend using a max level boost, at least not from level 1 on a class you're unfamiliar with. I would say if you have it, then use it once you're level 40 or so, that way you already have a basic grasp on your class's moveset. Even the story, something that I do consider to be part of the grind, is almost completely optional. And even better, if something you want is locked behind the story, you can just skip to that part of it, which I love. Now listen, I come from Final Fantasy XIV, and while that game has an absolutely impressive story, I don't care. I just wanted to get through it. I don't play MMOs for the story, I play to smack around bosses with my friends. The way I want to experience the story is after I rush through it and listen to a YouTube documentary explaining it all to me as I'm doing the stuff that I wanted to do in the first place. And like Final Fantasy, this game does have a really good story, but the difference here is that I didn't have to go through it to experience it. However, with all that said, from the fractured pieces that I have played, yeah, I still don't care about the story, but some of the set pieces in it are genuinely really grand for what they are. In fact, the whole world of Tyria is just kinda nice. All of it is sectioned off in their own individual maps, which is something I wish wasn't there, but I guess it is what it is. And the game has this watercolor kind of art style that I absolutely love. I think this game, like World of Warcraft, won't really look bad with age. Now, within those maps, there are smaller side quests. Now, Guild Wars doesn't really have quests in the same way that many others do. Side quests are shown as little Rion hearts around the map that just kind of prompt you to do some task in the general area. These are usually just do X, Y, or Z a certain amount of times. There is variety, and they are completely optional. Events, on the other hand, are much more focused on. These are randomly spawning group activities. They're a much better way to level, and definitely one of the more fun ways to do so. Dungeons are also here, though not nearly as prevalent. What they lack in quantity, they certainly make up for in quality though, as you can't just complete a dungeon by going through it once. Usually you go in for the first time, clear the place out, and then you unlock a much harder exploration mode, which usually has its own separate miniature contained story happening. And they're also pretty lengthy and can get pretty tough. And on that note, I do want to touch on the difficulty of Guild Wars 2. It is a much more skill-focused game than number-focused. With horizontal progression, no new gear or enemies will be any more powerful than the last. A high-tier armor set from the game's launch will still be viable today, so fights just get designed to be physically harder on the player. To use Final Fantasy again, raids in that game aren't like a dance. Everyone has to just go through the motions to stay alive. In Guild Wars 2, however, is like a high school dance. Yeah, sure, there are mechanics for you to do, but the most effective way to deal damage is to cluster together and then make the most out of your rotation. Because buffs stack, and that can double or even triple you and your group's damage output. That being said, the game isn't hard mechanically. Fights for the most part are fairly simple to execute and understand, and no battle really drags on for too long. That makes it a battle of will or attrition. But as simple as they are, they do still punish you heavily for failing. And with that, I think it's a good time to move on to the endgame. Now, because of how quickly getting to level 80 is, it's a little hard to pinpoint when the endgame actually starts, because more than 70% of the map is for max level players. And to that note, when you're level 80, just kinda do whatever you want. If you want to continue the story, then go ahead. There are 3 expansions, plus 5 smaller expansions of story content in the form of Living Seasons and the Icebroad Saga. And you still do have something to level. Experience points are still useful because you have to level up your mastery now, which lets you get access to certain activities or enhance your ability to do ones that you already do have access to. The game has a lot for players to explore, but it also lets you choose what it is you care about exploring in the first place. There are over 40 zones in the base game and its expansions, with their own checklists of stuff to do. Map completion is fun, and no one map ever overstays its welcome. Plus, with how weighty and natural the mounts feel to use, it's actually quite fun to navigate these places. Seriously, the mounts are oddly involved for an MMO. The fact that movement as a whole doesn't have that weird floatiness to it, I honestly didn't even notice that other games had it until I was playing Guild Wars 2. Now, along with that, there are also strikes, which are smaller, more contained raids, which are generally easier and shorter, along with fractals, which are reused story instances that are redesigned for multiple people. Now, I know that some people are going to scoff at the reuse of content, but I think it works well here. As I said before, the story has some pretty interesting set pieces that are reused well here. Plus, it's all balanced around 5 players. Now, there's also a pretty big crafting portion of Guild Wars, one that I actually interacted with. See, this game has a dedicated crafting material page, which means your inventory will no longer be flooded by materials that you may or may not even want to use. This is good. I think more games need to do this. And because of this, I was pretty okay with just gathering and collecting materials as I went. I have every profession spread out across many characters, and I'm currently trying to max out cooking as my first crafting skill, since food buffs are pretty important, and I can't cook in real life, so this is me compensating for that fact. Crafting in general is pretty important, but you don't need to be a crafter to have the best gear, but the best gear in the game can be gotten through crafting, and it can still be bought in the game's trading post or dropped by bosses, which is good. I've been told that this game draws a pretty even line between crafting and drops, which is nice since some games either lean too much on crafting or the professions as a whole are just useless. Now, I want to talk about something else, something that most MMOs have and not everyone gets right. PvP. I really like PvP in Guild Wars. Now, I want to talk about myself a little bit here. Whenever I get into an MMO, one of the few things that I have really high hopes for and am often disappointed by is the PvP. I liked it well enough in World of Warcraft, but never got super into it. I straight up don't like it in Final Fantasy, even after the massive rework, and I think that Elder Scrolls Online has a few good ideas, but never really got into it. But Black Desert, New World, and Destiny 2 had PvP that I quite enjoyed. Now, if you're not already into PvP in Guild Wars 2, you'll probably not understand how anyone could enjoy it, which I completely get, because I was not a fan of it at all when I started. It's a mess. Everyone seems to have God mode on at all times. I can't hit them most of the time, or I'm downed or planted, and I often die without even making the other players sweat. And I just didn't really want to touch the mode again. Like many others, I tried it, realized that it was usually a one-sided mess, and just left. Except I didn't leave. I was stubborn, and I kept joining matches only to top feed and lose. But at some point, it clicked. See, Guild Wars' PvP is not just about damage and stuns. It's so much more movement and bait-based. Everyone has access to like 2 or 3 disables and a skill that wipes them completely clear of all conditions. So it doesn't become a game of who can stun and dun the fastest. No, it's about conserving your dodges, baiting out condition removal skills, all while weaving in damage. And it's a shame that you have to learn the hard way for it to make any sense, but I'm certainly glad that I did, because when I did, I had a blast with PvP the moment that it clicked. It's not about rotation in PvP, and it's a lot of fun. Plus, even when you get down, you're not out of the fight. You can still deal damage, and because of the game's rally mechanic, you can just get right back up on certain classes, and you'll get up if you can take someone else out. A downed opponent is still a threat. PvP comes in 2 flavors, Instance 5v5 and World vs. World. 5v5 is nice, I like it. It's nice how the map dictates what the objective is, and there are constant automated tournaments, but I haven't done any because, I don't know, I just haven't. And there are season rewards for ranked mode that I've been told are actually quite good and promote playing well and improving. World v World is also here. To my understanding, AreaNet just started paying attention to this game mode. It's PvP on a big scale, because you can't have guild wars without guilds warring with each other. Now, I'm not going to join a guild because I'm stubborn. There are 4 maps and 3 teams. The goal is just to have as much territory to yourself. Now, the game as a whole uses mega servers, so as long as you're playing in the same region, you can play with anyone on there. But what server you do choose only dictates who you're with in World v World. It's fun, but I have yet to get super into it yet. Now, last and usually shortest part of this, the community. It's a lovely community. For the most part, I've gotten help where I needed it, and with the exception of the PvP lobby map chat, everyone is friendly. even if some of the stuff said in Black Citadel is weird, to say the least. Now, all of this is great. Guild Wars 2 is a pretty well-made and pretty well-rounded game with tons of content that you can interact with however you like. But how much does it cost? Will I need to take out a mortgage to play this game? The answer is no. Guild Wars 2 is 100% free to play. With no monthly sub, you can just download the base game right now and give it a shot. The expansions are the only things that you have to pay for to get, and oftentimes they're bundled together and go on sale pretty frequently. Now, granted, because of the horizontal progression, how much you get out of each expansion is wholly up to you and what you want to engage with. The other form of content are the living seasons, basically mini expansions in between the bigger ones. These can be bought with gems, the game's premium currency. Yes, this game has microtransactions, but let me finish before you write this off as modern gaming coming to ruin the party again. Gems can be bought with real-world money, with about 80 gems per US dollar, or on the flip side, you can exchange gold for gems at a rate at around 4 to 5 gems per gold piece. This game doesn't really give you gold and money very often, but it's not really hard to get. It's just a little bit more involved. And it's not like the game asks you to make it a job to get these things. Plus, with all the different methods of getting items to sell for gold, you don't even really need to farm anything, you just play the game however you want. Listen, I quite enjoyed my time with Guild Wars 2, and I think I will continue to. Will it replace Final Fantasy? Maybe. Not having a monthly sub certainly makes it easier to take a breather from the game since I don't feel like I have to play it to get my money's worth. But I've been Koji, talking about a new MMO that I found. And with all of that, the video is over now, so go away, but not before liking and subscribing if you liked the content, and also commenting if you've already tried Guild Wars and what your experience was like. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next video, which is hopefully going to be out in a more timely manner than this one was.